The biggest cliché in the world of James Bond is that he only drinks vodka martinis, full stop. This is a function of the movies where they use the vodka martini as shorthand for Bond's sophistication. But the Bond, as written by Ian Fleming, is quite different. Bond is a sophisticated agent. He knows his history, and he knows his alcohol. He's a connoisseur. Ultimately, if you want to be like Bond, you need to watch this video series to understand the background of booze, just as Bond does. So let's dive in, PCZ TV, shall we? Today's episode, Bond's Booze and Books, Episode 1. What could be more iconic than a Walther PPK, exotic travel, luxurious meals, and a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred? Nothing. But when you break down Bond's booze consumption in the books, you actually discover that it spans a wide variety of drinks, not just vodka martinis. He wasn't a one-trick pony. He had in-depth knowledge about the subject. And breaking it down further, just by categories consumed by novel, you might be surprised to learn that there is more whiskey mentioned than vodka martinis. But one needs to look no further than Sir Sean Connery to see why the vodka martini became the iconic image staple of Bond. The man is the king of cool, and he's just as responsible for the continuing popularity of the Walther PPK. But it's not the cinema Bond that we're examining today. We're going to examine the Fleming Bond, novel by novel. But there are some consistent motifs, and we'll take a look at those as we go along. Helping our adventure today are the books themselves. The very fine reviews by Joe McLeod on the HMM website, link in the description below, Stephan Kurr's book, 007 on the Rocks, as well as liquor.com for some of the historical background. So shake your martini, stir your gin and tonic, and sit back for a booze-filled journey through the world of Ian Fleming. Now, a word of warning. Do not try to drink along with Bond through this video. The man can certainly put it away. In fact, I'm going to have to break this video up into segments because of the massive variety of drinks he consumes and the background it takes to explain and discuss them all. So today will be 1953 and 1954 novels, although I will bounce around a bit where applicable. So let's kick it off with 1953's Casino Royale. Bond is introduced and starts drinking. His first drink? Not a martini. In fact, no martini to be found in this novel. Bond's first drink is an Americano. It's a combination of Campari, Cinzano, and Perrier with a twist. According to liquor.com, the Americano was first served in the 1860s at Gaspare Campari's bar in Milano, Italy. It's believed that the name stems from its popularity among American tourists. And it's possible that the name wasn't affixed until the Prohibition era, when Americans went to Europe in droves. Look, if they traveled all the way from the USA, I guess these folks were desperate for a drink, and they deserve, at least, to have a cocktail named after them. Next up is the infamous drink of Casino Royale. When Bond orders his signature drink from the bartender, he provides strict instructions on how to prepare the cocktail. A dry martini, 1. 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of Quina Lillet. Shake it until it's very well and it's ice cold. Then add a large thin slice of lemon peel. Now, liquor.com speculates it may also serve a broader literary purpose of portraying Bond as a hard-drinking secret agent who chose to take his drinks exceedingly strong and shaken until they were so cold that the alcohol couldn't be felt as it went down. Of note is how Fleming decided to have the character of Bond dedicate time in the novel to explain how to make the drink. Food and drink were a key component of the Bond character End of the story. Now the Fleming creation of a Vesper, which he later quipped, "I have sampled it several months later and found it unpalatable." Well, he's not wrong. They are horrible. I have had one of these, and I gotta say, they're horrible. If you're a fan, can you pop in the comments and explain what you like about them? In any case, Bond ends on champagne. Taittinger, Blanc de Blanc, Brut, 1943. This is a famous house of champagne and well respected. Founded in 1734, the Taittinger cellars were established in the Gallo-Roman chalk pits, dating from around the 4th century. This is a pretty neat reuse of Roman leftovers, really. It was during this time that Taittinger became a champagne house of world renown. So booze-wise, the first novel was a rather modest, by Bond standards, selection. 1954's Live and Let Die introduces us to the first Bond martini, and, surprisingly, it's the gin martini. Bond would go on to favor the vodka martini by a pretty high ratio in the novels, but it's interesting that it's the gin martini that's mentioned first. Near as I can tell, the gin martini is called out by name only twice by Ian Fleming, in Live and Let Die and in 007 in New York. But first, some history of the main ingredient, gin. Gin's simplest definition is a spirit flavored with juniper berries and other botanicals. But beyond that, you can pretty much add anything you want to flavor it. James May famously used mustard as one of the flavor ingredients in his gin. Now, with that being said, gin is divided into flavor profiles such as London Dry, Old Tom, Plymouth, and more. But Fleming specifically calls out House of Lords and Beefeater's gin. So our focus will be on the London Dry gin. This is one of the most common gin styles, and often what people think of when they ask for the spirit. Per liquor.com, London Dry bottlings are usually, quote, crisp and clean with a pine-forward notes of juniper as a dominant element. This iconic style was created well, you guessed it, in London in the 19th century. Now, unlike champagne, a London Dry gin doesn't need to be made in London to be called London Dry gin. It can be produced anywhere in the world. Okay, so let's look at the two brands mentioned by Fleming. Felix Leiter and James Bond meet in the King Cole Bar at the St. Regis in Live and Let Die prior to heading out to Harlem. They have martinis while making plans for the night. They imbibe with House of Lords gin, which was a brand put out by Booth's Gin, which itself was founded around 1740 in London. Booth's Gin became increasingly popular during the 20th century and features in many post-war films. Just look for that unique hexagonal bottle. There were two main varieties, Booth's High and Dry, which is a classic-style London gin, and Booth's Finest Old Dry Gin, which is also known as Booth's House of Lords Gin. They apparently made their export gin to a different proof level, as indicated by Bond's surprise on drinking it. The second variety, the House of Lords Gin, was distilled in Clerkenwell, London, and was matured in wooden casks, which were, at least at one point, ex-Burgundy casks, and more commonly ex-sherry casks. This was sometimes known as yellow gin. Now, Booth discontinued theirs, in the mid-1970s. And most importantly, do not confuse yellow gin with Frank Zappa's Yellow Snow. Now, we don't know exactly what variant that Bond and Felix opted for, but this is a classic gin of its time. Beefeater's is arguably the most famous gin to us Yanks. Its history can be traced back to 1862, but it's the recipe from 1895, which specifies that 9 botanicals are essential to make this particular gin. To be honest, The description of all those botanical secret herbs and spices sounds a lot like the Colonel's secret recipe for KFC. In any case, now that we've identified the gin in question, we move on specifically to the martini. The martini has its origins in the mid to late 1800s, but featured Old Tom's gin. The great thing about old booze history is the confusion surrounding it. Just as no one knows why it was called Old Tom's, no one really knows the exact recipe, and taste-wise, people say it falls somewhere between the Genever and the London Dry Gin. But the martini, as we might recognize it today, didn't really emerge until the 1890s. And martinis were made by French dry vermouth became the standard by the turn of the century. London dry gins began to replace Old Tom. Regardless of what the gin and dry vermouth combination was called, the general trend was a drying out of the martini, which would continue for the next century. Fleming himself was fond of describing the Bond martini as dry or even double dry. Now, martinis gained new popularity after it graced the big screen in the 1934 film The Thin Man. In that movie, a retired detective named Nick Charles states, "A dry martini, you always shake to waltz time." Now, is this a source of James Bond shaken, not stirred, dry martini? Was Fleming influenced by this movie? Who knows? The dry, by the way, referred to the martini's ratio of gin to vermouth, which after World War I reached upwards to 25-1. In Diamonds Are Forever, Bond doesn't recognize the vermouth. Now, Liquor.com speculates that good European vermouth was also inaccessible at the time. No one knew how to store it, it got browned, it got oxidized, no one wanted it. Maybe Bond didn't recognize it because it was stored so poorly. In Live and Let Die, Bond specifies House of Lords gin, and Fleming would later specify the vermouth as Martini and Rossi. Ironically, the last drink of James Bond, if you will, would be in 007 in New York, and Bond specifies Beefeaters with a domestic vermouth, shaken with a twist of lemon peel. Vermouth type, in this case, unknown. And so ends the gin martini. Now, fear not, we'll see gin again in this discussion. After all, how could we not? Because Bond is English, but not in the form of a martini. And what's a Martini and Rossi? And what the heck is a vermouth? First of all, vermouth is a fortified wine, flavored with various botanicals. And here we go again with all these botanicals. Historically, there have been two main types of vermouth, sweet and dry. It was, ironically, initially a medicinal product, but over time changed to a flavoring agent. And Martini and Rossi, they date back to 1863, where Alessandro Martini and Luigi Rossi took over a distillery in a small village near Turin and created a vermouth that has endured for more than 160 years. Now, they also supported some of the classic motorsport teams of the 60s and 70s and 80s, etc. What a great livery they have. Moving on, next up is my butchering of the German language. Bond drinks Liebermilch or Liebfraumilch or Liebenfraumilch. Okay, I totally, sorry if you speak German, my apologies, but apparently that's German for Our Lady's Milk, in reference to the Virgin Mary. But whoa. Hold on just a second. What the heck are the Germans up to with this? The Virgin Mary's milk. What? These are some seriously sick people. Come on, guys, this imagery is just wrong. Sorry. And now we resume our standard programming. Libra Milch is a style of semi-sweet white German wine which is produced mainly for export. So, okay, I get it. That's how good it is, air quotes, You just ship it out en masse because no local will actually drink it. Well, little wonder that the term Liebfraumilch is associated with low-quality wine. In the US and the UK, perhaps the best-known example has been Blue Nun. After World War II, this brand became wildly popular in the UK and the United States for selling at the same price as second-growth red Bordeaux wine, which to the French is known as Plonk. So, Bond and his friends enjoyed Liebfraumilch. Boy, someone tell me how to say that. Declaring at one point that the contents of their glasses were as good a Liebfraumilch as you can get in America. Well, that's damned by faint praise, really. That's why Bond would go for such a low-quality wine is beyond me. I'm sure, were it possible, this would have been the wine sold in boxes in the 50s. I'm very, very disappointed in you, 007. Moving on to Haig and Haig. From their own website, Haig's whiskey can claim to be the oldest whiskey in the world. Oh, that's a modest boast. A very young John Haig set up the original distillery, the Kilbaggy distillery, in the 18th century. Although his family were noted distillers sometime before that, I love this point. His great-great-grandfather was arrested in 1655 for distilling whiskey on a Sunday. Oh my gosh. His grandson founded the Cameron Bridge Distillery in 1824. And this is where the now famous Haig whiskey was first produced, making Haig one of the oldest and truest Scotch whiskies ever produced, or so they say. Now, they do have a very unique bottle, that pinch bottle. It's really cool. Bond drinks it with both soda and on the rocks. We'll see mention of this brand showing up again, but it's not consumed by Bond, it's consumed by Draco. So, this is a good Scotch, by the way. You are redeeming yourself, James. Next on the menu is the Old Fashioned. The Old Fashioned is arguably the most well-known whiskey cocktail in the world. Essentially, it's just some bourbon with some dashes of bitter that's been sweetened with sugar. Bond moves on to a Scotch and soda. No mention of brand at this stage, but this drink is a classic. Its precise origins are murky, but mixing soda water and Scotch was going on for about as long as soda water was available, which was roughly from the late 1700s to the early 1800s. Scotch and soda was mentioned in Cincinnati barman C.F. Lauder's 1895 book, The Mixicologists. And sorry, I just included this factoid because I love that word. Okay, finally to the classic, the vodka martini. Can there be anything more famous? I mean, seriously, how many folks drink vodka martinis only because of James Bond? Well, I sure do. Bond would order vodka martinis in various forms, but usually strong, as in a double. In Live and Let Die, Solitaires makes some for Bond per his instructions. Hope it made it right, she says. 6-1 sounds terribly strong. The most famous scene occurs in Dr. No. Looking ahead, where Bond specifies a medium vodka dry martini with a slice of lemon peel, shaken, not stirred, please. I would prefer Russian or Polish vodka. Now, in my opinion, Bond should have specified only Polish vodka because, as you know, Poland is the home of vodka. Vodka? Oh yeah. In 1403, vodka was first made, and it was made in Poland, not Russia. As usual, the Russians roll in uninvited, usually with Cossacks or tanks, and claim everything they steal as their own. Naughty, naughty people. But let's take a sidebar and talk about vodka. It's a relatively neutral spirit. Traditionally, it's made by distilling a liquid from fermented cereal grains or potatoes. But vodka can be distilled from any starch or sugar-rich plant matter, so you'll see that some modern brands use corn, sugarcane, fruits, honey, maple sap, or even just ferment a solution of crystal sugar and yeast. Not that it was in the novels, but in some of the movies, Bond does drink Polish vodka. I'm happy. Good choice, 007. The pepper theory. It will be brought up in Moonraker, so we'll punt it until then. And we're back. Occasionally Bond would specify adding a lemon peel. I didn't find an instance where he asked for an olive. So let's break down the vodka martini. As usual, with drinks, the history is murky, probably because people consumed too many of the namesake drink to remember the details. The practice of substituting vodka for gin started to gain traction around the mid-century. By the time Fleming was writing, it was a common practice, and vodka's rise to fame really began strong in the 1950s, and at the time of this recording of the video, it's the top-selling spirit in the U.S. And shaken? When shaken, a drink chills very rapidly and then plateaus at its new max chill temperature, with a further shaking yielding only a smaller and smaller decrease in temperature and additional dilution. So it keeps the drink as cold and potent as possible. And considering that Bond is looking for potency, as he frequently orders doubles, this is consistent with his desires. Of course, being the internet, I've seen statements completely to the contrary, and saying that shaking dilutes the drink more than stirring. I suppose we could belabor this issue to death, but given it's a popular topic and has been covered elsewhere and debated elsewhere, let's move on. Now, if you're insulted by this topic, go ahead, leave a comment below. The final drink is champagne. Strangways left a case of the best champagne in Jamaica he could find. Well, that was very kind of him. Of course, many think champagne or champagne is just the generic term for sparkling wine. But champagne's use is legally protected by an 1891 treaty, which is an appellation d'origine contrôle. I said that wrong. My apologies for the French. The term champagne can be used exclusively for sparkling wines made only in certain areas, namely those areas of the Champagne region of France. So this is a French champagne. Type unknown, but the best that the commander could find in Jamaica. Whew. Thus ends part 1. Hopefully, we've dispelled the myth that Bond survives on vodka martinis alone. He is powered by booze, all right. He just chooses which one for the moment. Bye!